I don't agree with the vaccine mandates that's being put because everyone has the right to choose what to put in their body, and it is not the school's right to tell us what to do with our body.
It's just not fair at all, especially when you have people with legitimate medical and personal issues that prevent them from taking these.
They said that I did not need to be vaccinated, and it was just encouraged. So I started the program, but then I got an email and it said, you must be vaccinated to attend the campus. So it was like they lured me in like a fish. It was like bait. And then next thing I know, in 3 weeks, I'm getting vaccinated, getting a vaccine I don't want, just so I can keep those courses that I badly want because I really want to be a personal trainer.
As long as we can offer this sort of in-person training safely, I don't understand why they can't be doing this. I think it's really irresponsible of them to be picking winners and losers with people's and Alberta's future.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Adam Sos here for Rebel News, and in just a moment, I'm going to be joined by member of the Legislative Assembly here in Alberta for Peace River, Dan Williams. Dan Williams, along with MLA for Cardston-Siksika, Joseph Scow, have signed a letter suggesting that it is indeed time, and well beyond time, for those students who have been excluded from post-secondary education, regardless of their vaccine status, to be allowed to return to school. For more on that, I'm joined by Dan.
Truth is it's not that it might be time. It is time. There's no might or maybe about it. Let's be honest. I signed this letter with Joe Scow. We wrote it together because we think that there are disproportionately rural Albertans who made the choice themselves that they didn't want to get vaccinated, who are being excluded from their own future. And these post-secondary institutions, publicly funded, have made a decision to say that they're only allowing vaccinated students to come onto campus or even to learn virtually, which is disproportionately affecting communities like mine. I mean, I hear individuals who have family members who are going to law school. They moved back to Alberta from other places so they can go to law school here because they thought it would be better. And here we have our own post-secondaries, individuals that want to go to be power engineers, pipe fitters, welders at these polytechnical colleges and trade schools being told that, no, we're not going to let you build your future and build Alberta's future because you made a personal health choice to say you're not getting vaccinated. And I think it really is a problem. These post-secondary institutions, they hold the keys to individuals' lives and their futures, but also to Alberta's future. And I don't want my communities to be left out on that. Individuals have made their choice now. As long as we can offer this sort of in-person training safely, I don't understand why they can't be doing this. I think it's really irresponsible of them to be picking winners and losers with people's and Alberta's future.
Well, and I mean, we have talked to, we're one of the very few media outlets, but we've actually gone and talked to these students, some of them organizing protests, some of them simply heartbroken. And some of these stories truly are heartbreaking. We're talking about people who did everything right, went to university, are in 3.5 years into their degree, and they're not going to be able to finish their degree, and there's no online alternatives. If they aren't allowed to return, it could be that they're massively in debt. They're 3.5 years of their life are gone, and there's no prospect on the horizon of them finishing that education and getting a career. What kind of personal stories have you heard from your constituents of people for those out there who maybe think that this is just an ideological thing, what are the real human costs associated with excluding these individuals?
These kids that I'm talking to, they're not political. I don't know many very active political 18 to 24-year-olds, right? They're not ideological. They made decisions, them and their families. I hope they made it in good conscience with their physicians for what they're doing in terms of their vaccination status. And now they're being told that they can't finish the rest of their education. And these guys aren't trying to put anyone at risk. They're saying to themselves, if Alberta Health Services, if the folks working in acute care centers, if the folks working in long-term care centers and emergency settings, if they can test as an option, how is it that my university isn't able to provide that same kind of flexibility for me? It's nonsensical to them. My dad was the first one in his family, immediate family, to get a university degree. Rural Alberta kid, worked in industry and private business for a big section of his life and went back to school to university to get a degree. He was proud of that. He did a lot with that. My whole family is proud of him for that. We're stripping away the opportunity for these kids to do that in the future, to bring that kind of expertise back to rural Alberta, to bring that kind of training back. And I just can't highlight this enough. It's also going to make this job shortage that we have with skilled labor even worse down the road. I think disproportionately rural Albertans are the ones that want to go and become tradesmen and tradeswomen. And I think that that trade ticket ought to have the same kind of merit and worth as any university degree. Mm-hmm. And it's not the city kids lining up around the block to get these the way that it is rural. There's pride and dignity in it. We get that. Our family members, our fathers, our mothers, our siblings are the ones who have these trade tickets already. They inspire us to go and do it. And now we have these schools, the ones that I think at the very least would be common sense, these trade schools now saying, nope, go take a hike, find somewhere else, find a different future for you. You're not wanted. I just find it frustrating. So my plea to these universities, these post-secondary educations, these schools is to say, if AHS and our health authorities across Canada can do this safely, right, across the world, then surely so can the universities in a classroom setting. I mean, right now, my question is how come when most of these institutions doing online learning only aren't allowing, at least now while it's online, people who aren't vaccinated? Who, I mean, heck, I suppose you could test to learn calculus in your own living room. If that's what it takes, whatever, let these kids in.
Yeah. Well, and the other troubling thing you point out there and that we're hearing from students is in the early onset of COVID-19, most of these schools transitioned to online in order to ensure that they could continue this. Now, as vaccine mandates have come into effect, there seems to be sort of an ideological push, very much sort of in line with Justin Trudeau, that vaccines are the only solution, even if that isn't necessarily evidenced, even if that isn't necessarily the science. They're saying this is the only alternative. Another case, one of our fightvaccinepassports.com cases, their emergency frontline responders, actually one of the lead individuals is vaccinated. But what he's saying is that, and this is relatively self-evident when you think about it, what he's saying is that we should all actually be being tested, those of us working on the front lines, regardless of vaccine status, to ensure that our clients are safe. And that logic, or their patients rather, are safe. That logic carries over to universities. If we know now that vaccines don't entirely stop the spread, they likely help with the reduction, but they certainly don't stop the spread. What we do know is someone who has a negative test can't spread coronavirus because they do not have it. That seems to be the evidence, that seems to be sort of self-explanatory. And some schools were doing that. They were affording that opportunity. Some the students had to pay for themselves, some not, but they had that option there, and it's very logical and very safe. Why do you think it is that they're not willing to venture down that road and they're adhering to this one-minded policy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a public health expert by any means. I'm just here to represent my constituents, and their will is pretty obvious to me, is they want to continue to live their lives. They want to get back to normal. And it almost seems like this triumvirate of JT, CBC, and the NDP in Alberta are ganging up to create this sense of fear that there's no way this is going to end. You have to get used to living like this forever. These things are indefinite. I mean, everyone has seen the COVID memes of our 55th booster shot are going to be needed before Christmas. I think that in reality is, and they may not like it, is that there is a path forward beyond just one policy, right? And these public universities and institutions have an opportunity here to grab that. They don't need to play into this fear that the mainstream media and Justin Trudeau are trying to stoke to divide Canadians, insinuating Justin Trudeau did that those who don't get vaccinated are misogynists and racist. I mean, that's really interesting to me, given all the multicultural and females I know that have made the choice to get vaccinated or not. I mean, I just think it's part of this fear campaign that is obviously happening. And like I said, that triumvirate of JT, CBC, and NDP, all trying to stoke the same thing in the same way. And I felt like it was my job with MLA SCAL, at the very least, to just call a spade and say what it is. The truth is this can be done safely. These kids don't have to be in this spot. It seems absolutely reasonable to me. I mean, why not?
And this is exactly it, this juxtaposition of, you're seeing even Fauci saying, well, it's not going to be boosters and masks forever. You're seeing the UK starting to open things up. And particularly on the note of misogyny and bigotry, the Black community in Canada is the most vaccine hesitant of any demographic. So that narrative doesn't really hold water. They're clearly trying to perpetuate some sort of narrative and to promulgate fear and certainly sow some seeds of division. And unfortunately, it's working, and that's very upsetting. There is some promising news, though, for I think people out there who have been maybe a little bit disappointed in how Alberta has managed this with the truck convoy and some of these trucking mandates, supply demand issues, and some of the overreach by Justin Trudeau. Jason Kenney in the last couple of days has started to say, well, enough is enough, and he's making a little bit more sense than some of the other leaders in the country. Is there a sentiment that there is another way forward? The UK, Fauci, these other people who are starting to have different voices, are those voices starting to be heard within the government here in Alberta?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not just a glass half full guy. I think it's starting to come to the spot where we're going to have to say that the glass is just full. There's a bright future for us here. We do not need to live in this indefinitely. I think a lot of people, including conservatives, said, sure, let's go along with the science where it leads us. And I think a lot of the evidence now is showing that we're heading in the right direction. I'm incredibly optimistic. I think Alberta's got to be one of those provinces that leads the way. And I was just speaking to Minister Sani today about the transportation question. What the federal government's done surrounding that is just a complete quagmire. It is a disaster waiting to happen. We already have supply chain shortages breaking down and being able to get. And speaking to folks who deal in construction, a truss company up here in La Crete, where I'm from, they're having to get 8 months out to try and get supplies. So they're ordering supplies for folks that don't know that they need a truss and are building a house yet. So this is where we're at. And so what Justin Trudeau's doing is going to make it 10 times worse. And I am optimistic that I think that a lot is changing now. I think everyone's coming on to a common sense approach. And we're in a spot now where Alberta can lead the way. And it's not going to be an instant reversal by any means, right? This is a big machine to turn around, and we have to convince a lot of our fellow Albertans what direction we need to go and how we can do that safely. But I'm optimistic. I'm feeling a lot better about it now than it was before. So.
Well, and I think one of the ways that this conversation can change is by politicians using language that unites rather than rhetoric that divides. We've seen many media outlets mischaracterizing even this truck convoy, mischaracterizing people who are against mandates as anti-vaxxers. We've seen a lot of that sort of rhetoric driven federally, but I think that there is a hope and an optimism of people coming together. We're seeing people who are vaccinated, double vaccinated, who've been going all along, coming out and having a different opinion on this stuff. Two people out there who may very well malign you for daring to suggest these people should be allowed to go back to school and live their lives. For people who malign anyone who has asked questions this whole time, do you have any words to them, any words of unity, any words to bring people together to contradict the negative rhetoric out there?
Yeah, sure. I'd say, I'm a conservative, and I don't think that's a dirty word. I think that's a good thing. I think conserving what we've inherited is a wonderful thing, but conservatives understand one thing, first and foremost, and I can even find folks on the other side of the aisle that would want the same sentiment. We all agree that good things in our society are more easily destroyed than they are built. And these folks who come out to divide, who try and call people bigots and misogynists and try and drive people into the ground, try and write this narrative that there are good guys and they're the ones who are causing everything to happen that's wrong. I think that's problematic. And what they're doing is they're destroying the fabric of who we are as a country. They're saying that there's more that divides us than unites us. And as a conservative, I don't believe that. I think Canada still is a good place. I think Alberta still is the greatest province in the entire Confederation. I still think that we have a bright future. And I think it's because we're not just dependent on the whims and choices of one politician or one bad decision or one pandemic that came and flattened us. I think there's something deeply seated in our DNA as Albertans, as Canadians, that loves liberty, ordered liberty, that loves freedom, that loves a sense of community that isn't going to be torn apart. So anyone who wants to do that division, who fundamentally, like Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau, who want to malign and vilify those who are making different choices than them, I want to lionize those who are living as individuals, who are making choices and thinking for themselves, who are thinking with common sense, and who are truly exemplifying the best of Canada and of Alberta. I think in the end, Canada is something that was built over many, many generations. And it can't be destroyed just by one man or one government. It's got to live longer than that. It's more than just a political state, right? It's a people. I belong to that people. I'm proud of belonging to that. So I think you're right. I think this language of division, it's an attempt to try and destroy who we are as Canada, as Canadians, and who I am as a conservative and Albertan is to respond to that by trying to build something great. That's why I'm where I am today. And trust me, I wasn't praying and hoping that I had this fall in my lap when I got elected in April 2019, but it happened. So what am I going to do but try and do the best I can? And I'm not an optimist out of some sense of naivete. I'm an optimist because I believe that conservatives are fundamentally happy people. We are happy warriors. We want to build something great, and we've inherited something very great from our previous generations, from my parents, from my family members, from my great-grandparents. I think that's something we have an obligation to continue. We can't just throw in the towel and say, what, Trudeau's beat us, right? We can't let, Notley create a division and say that these people are less Canadian now or less Albertan because they've made their own health decisions. I can't do that. I have an obligation to represent my constituents and see the future of Alberta as something that's bright and beautiful.
Certainly a refreshing shift to have a conservative politician actually talking conservative talking points and not simply echoing the nonsense coming out of Justin Trudeau. I want to thank Dan for joining me for this important update. And for everyone out there, I'm sure you'll join me in hoping that more conservative politicians in this province and indeed across the country start sounding a little bit more like Dan. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. So many people have been excluded from normal elements of life, normal at least until COVID-19 kicked in. People have lost their jobs, not received severance, students have been excluded, kids have been prevented from accessing recreational sports. It's absolute madness, and that's why we started FightVaccinePassports.com, because we are challenging these unethical and un-Canadian mandates. If you want to help our legal fight, go to FightVaccinePassports.com, make a contribution. You'll receive a tax receipt because those funds go to the Democracy Fund, which is a registered Canadian charity. So as I said, you'll receive a tax receipt for your contribution to the fight for freedom.